She smiled and said, "It was an accident, but my laptop had everything, my work, my future, my secrets." What she didn't know was I had one backup, and the next morning changed her life forever. "Oh, sorry, I accidentally dropped your laptop in the pool." My sister said it the way you'd say you forgot to pick up milk. Casual, almost bored. She was standing in the kitchen doorway with a towel over her shoulder, her hair still wet from swimming, and she didn't even look at me when she said it. I stared at her. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "It just slipped," Vanessa added, reaching for a glass from the cabinet. "I was carrying it out to show Mom that article you sent, and it just slipped." My MacBook Pro, the one I'd saved for over 7 months. The one that had my entire freelance portfolio on it, my client files, my contracts, 3 years of design work, and, most importantly, a folder I hadn't backed up yet. A folder labeled Grandpa Ray. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table peeling an orange. She didn't look up either. "It was just an accident, Naomi," she said. "Don't make a big deal out of it." I didn't argue. I didn't say a word. I walked out to the pool and looked down at the water. I could see it sitting at the bottom, the Apple logo still faintly glowing through 4 feet of chlorinated blue, like a little ghost light winking up at me, saying goodbye. That night, I made a few calls. I changed some passwords. And at 6:15 the next morning, my sister woke up to something she never saw coming. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened that morning, and what my grandfather left me that was bigger than a house, a car, and $340,000 in savings, I need to go back to the beginning. My name is Naomi Elise Carter. I was 27 when all of this happened, but the roots of the story go back decades. Back to a 2-story house on Mulberry Lane in Ridgewood, New Jersey, where I grew up with my older sister Vanessa, my mother Gloria, and my grandfather Raymond Carter Sr. My father left when I was 4. I have exactly one memory of him. A pair of brown shoes by the front door and the sound of a car starting. That's it. No face. No voice. Just shoes and an engine. Vanessa was 6, and apparently remembers more, though what she remembers changes depending on who she's trying to impress. After Dad left, it was Mom and Grandpa Ray who held it together. Mom worked double shifts at a hospital in Newark. She was an administrative coordinator, which meant she handled billing disputes and insurance claims, and came home every night with a headache and a short temper. She loved us, I believe that, but she loved Vanessa louder. Vanessa was the golden child. She had Mom's face. Wide brown eyes, a perfect smile, the kind of cheekbones you'd see in a magazine. She was funny and charming, and knew exactly how to tilt her head and say the right thing at the right moment. Teachers adored her. Neighbors adored her. Mom adored her. I was quieter, bookish. I had Grandpa Ray's face, round, serious, a little stubborn around the jaw. I got good grades, kept my room clean, made dinner when Mom was working late, and never asked for anything because I'd learned early that asking led to comparisons, and comparisons led to losing. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Mom would say, not with cruelty, but with this tired kind of bewilderment. Like she genuinely couldn't understand why I wasn't more sparkly. But Grandpa Ray understood me. He was a retired postal worker who'd spent 41 years delivering mail in the same 12-block radius of East Orange. He had hands like leather gloves and a voice like warm gravel, and every Saturday morning he'd sit me down at the kitchen table and teach me something. Not school stuff, life stuff. "Naomi," he'd say, pushing a plate of toast toward me, "let me tell you something about money." And he taught me about savings accounts when I was 8, compound interest. When I was 10, the difference between assets and liabilities. When I was 12, he taught me about property deeds, about LLCs, about how rich people stayed rich not because they earned more, but because they understood where to put what they had. "Money is just organized patience," he'd say. "You put it in the right place, you leave it alone, and it grows. Most people can't leave it alone. That's their problem." Vanessa never sat in on these Saturday lessons. She was at the mall, or at a friend's house, or sleeping in until noon. Mom thought Grandpa Ray's lessons were a little much for young girls. "Let them be kids, Dad," she'd tell him. "One of them wants to learn." He'd reply, "I'm not going to stop her." That phrase, "one of them wants to learn," became a wedge. A small one at first, barely noticeable. But over the years, it widened into something that split our family right down the middle. By the time I was 18, I had a savings account with $11,400 in it, mostly birthday money, odd jobs, and the $50 Grandpa Ray gave me every month that I was never allowed to spend. "That's your seed money," he'd say. "Don't touch it until you know exactly what you're planting." Vanessa, at 20, had a closet full of designer bags, a maxed-out credit card, and a boyfriend named Derek, who drove a leased BMW and sold premium supplements that turned out to be repackaged protein powder from a warehouse in Bayonne. Mom bailed Vanessa out of $6,200 in credit card debt that year. She told me about it like it was a weather report. Your sister got into a little trouble. I helped her out. $6,000? I said, "She's learning," Mom replied. "Everyone makes mistakes." I didn't say anything, but I noticed that Grandpa Ray's jaw tightened the way it always did when he was biting back words he knew would start a fight. He pulled me aside that night. We were sitting on the back porch, watching fireflies blink over the neighbor's fence. "Naomi," he said quietly, "I want you to listen to me carefully. There are people in this world who will always find someone to catch them when they fall. And there are people who learn how to land on their own. Your mother loves Vanessa, and that's fine. That's a mother's right. But love without accountability isn't love. It's a trap. It traps the person giving it and the person receiving it. Do you understand?" I nodded, though I didn't fully understand. "Not then." "Good," he said, "because one day when I'm gone, you're going to need to remember that." I didn't know what he meant by that either. Not yet. I went to Rutgers on a partial scholarship and worked part-time at a print shop to cover the rest. Vanessa went to a community college for 2 semesters, dropped out, and moved in with Derek. When Derek got arrested for tax fraud, turns out premium supplements had premium tax problems, Vanessa moved back home. Mom converted the guest room into Vanessa's room. Again, I graduated with a degree in graphic design and started freelancing. It was slow at first. Logo designs for $200, website mock-ups for $400, branding packages for small businesses that paid late or not at all. But I kept going because Grandpa Ray had taught me that the first 2 years of any business are about survival, not success. "You're building roots," he'd say on our Sunday phone calls. "Nobody sees roots, but without them, nothing stands." By 24, I was making $4,800 a month. By 25, $6,200. I had a studio apartment in Montclair, a used Honda Civic I'd paid for in cash, and a savings account that had grown to $43,000. Not rich, not even close, but stable, independent, mine. Vanessa, meanwhile, had gone through 3 more boyfriends, 2 more jobs, and 1 more bailout from Mom, this time for $3,800 to cover a car payment on a Lexus she couldn't afford. And Grandpa Ray was getting sick. It started in the fall of 2021. A cough that wouldn't quit. Then weight loss. 20 pounds in 2 months on a man who was already thin. He went to the doctor in October, and by November, we knew. Stage 3 lung cancer. I drove to Ridgewood the day we got the diagnosis. When I walked into his room, he was sitting on the edge of his bed, fully dressed, his shoes on, like he was ready to go somewhere. "Sit down, baby girl," he said. I sat. My hands were trembling. He noticed, but didn't mention it. "I'm not going to waste time feeling sorry for myself," he said. "I've had 81 years, 41 of them delivering mail in the rain. That's plenty." I tried to laugh. It came out like a croak. "I need to talk to you about some things," he continued. "Important things. Not right now. I need to get a few things in order first. But soon. You and me. Just us." "What kind of things?" He looked at me for a long moment. "The kind of things your mother and sister wouldn't understand." That should have been my first clue. Over the next 3 months, Grandpa Ray got worse, and I visited every weekend. Vanessa visited twice. Mom visited regularly, but spent most of her time fussing with his blankets and arguing with the home nurse about meal schedules. She wasn't good with sickness. It made her anxious. And when Gloria Carter got anxious, she got controlling. During one of my visits in January 2022, Grandpa Ray asked me to close the bedroom door. Mom was downstairs making soup she'd burn, and Vanessa wasn't there. It was just us. He reached under his mattress, literally under his mattress, like something out of a movie, and pulled out a manila envelope. It was thick, sealed with packing tape, and my name was written on the front in his careful block handwriting. "Naomi, don't open this now," he said. "Don't open it until after. You'll know when." "After what?" He gave me a look. "Grandpa, after," he repeated. "And Naomi, don't tell your mother, don't tell Vanessa, don't tell anyone. Put it somewhere safe and wait." "You're scaring me." "Good," he said. "Fear means you're paying attention." I took the envelope home that night and locked it in the fireproof safe I kept in my closet, the one Grandpa Ray had insisted I buy when I turned 21. "Every adult needs a safe," he'd said. "Not for valuables, for things that matter." I didn't open the envelope. I didn't even hold it up to the light. I trusted him completely. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that envelope was a key, not a metaphorical key, an actual literal key to something that would change everything. Raymond Carter Sr. died on March 14, 2022, at 4:20 in the morning. Mom called me at 4:47. I was already awake. I'd been having trouble sleeping for weeks, like my body knew what was coming before my mind did. "He's gone," Mom said. Her voice was flat. Not cold, flat, like a tire that had been slowly losing air for months and finally gave out. I drove to Ridgewood in the dark. The house smelled like eucalyptus and disinfectant. Vanessa was on the couch in the living room crying. Real tears, to be fair. Whatever else I can say about my sister, she did love Grandpa Ray. She just loved him the way she loved everything, intensely, briefly, and when it was convenient. Mom was in the kitchen making coffee because that's what Gloria Carter did in a crisis. She made coffee. The funeral was 4 days later at Greater Hope Baptist Church on Elm Street. 212 people showed up. I know because I counted. 41 years of delivering mail meant Grandpa Ray knew everyone on those 12 blocks, and they all came. Mr. Henderson from the barbershop, Mrs. Okafor who ran the daycare, the Reyes family who'd moved away 6 years ago but drove 4 hours to be there. Even old Eddie Tucker, who was 93 and had to be wheeled in by his grandson, but refused to miss it. Vanessa gave the eulogy. She was good at it. She was good at anything that involved an audience. She told a story about Grandpa Ray teaching her to ride a bike, which was sweet, except I was pretty sure it was actually me he taught. Vanessa had learned to ride a bike at Ashley Patel's house, but I didn't correct her, not at a funeral. Mom sat in the front row and cried quietly into a handkerchief. I sat next to her and didn't cry at all. Not because I wasn't devastated, I was destroyed. But I was doing what Grandpa Ray taught me to do in a crisis. Observe, watch, pay attention. And what I observed was this. Mom's friend Brenda, a woman I'd never liked, a woman who wore too much perfume and smiled with her mouth but never her eyes, was sitting in the third row next to a man in a gray suit I didn't recognize. They whispered through the entire service. And when the service ended, the man in the gray suit found my mother and handed her a business card. I didn't think much of it at the time. That was my mistake. 3 weeks after the funeral, Mom called a family meeting. This was unusual. Gloria Carter didn't do family meetings. She did announcements. She'd decide something and inform you. And, if you disagreed, she'd ask why you were being difficult. But this time, she used the words family meeting and asked us both to come to the house on Saturday at noon. I arrived at 11:55. Vanessa was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a Diet Coke and a look on her face I couldn't read. Mom was at the stove, which meant she was nervous. Gloria Carter cooked when she was nervous. Badly, but persistently. "Sit down, Naomi," Mom said. I sat. "I've been talking to a lawyer," she said, turning from the stove. "Mr. Whitfield. He specializes in estates and probate. He's been helping me sort out your grandfather's affairs." I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. "What kind of affairs?" "Well, as you know, your grandfather owned this house." I nodded. He'd bought it in 1978 for $62,000, a number he mentioned proudly at least once a year. By 2022, it was worth somewhere around $680,000. Ridgewood real estate had gone through the roof, and he had some savings, Mom continued. "More than I realized, actually." "How much more?" Mom glanced at Vanessa. That glance, quick, conspiratorial, almost rehearsed, made my stomach drop. "About $340,000, Mom said. "Between his savings accounts, a small investment portfolio, and his pension payout." $340,000. I didn't move. I didn't blink. "Mr. Whitfield helped me go through the will," Mom said. She pulled a document from a folder on the counter. A document I noticed was already flagged with colored sticky tabs, which meant it had been reviewed multiple times before this family meeting. "Your grandfather left the house to me," Mom said. "Which makes sense. I've been living here, taking care of him. And the savings, he left those to be divided between the family." "Divided how?" I asked. Another glance at Vanessa. "Equally, between the three of us." Something was wrong. I could feel it the way you feel a storm coming before the sky changes, a pressure in the air, a stillness that isn't peaceful. "Can I see the will?" I asked. Mom hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough. "Of course," she said, sliding the document across the table. I read it. It was 4 pages, typed, notarized, dated February 2nd, 2022, 6 weeks before Grandpa Ray died. The language was standard. The signatures looked right. Everything looked right. but it didn't feel right. Because here's the thing. Grandpa Ray had talked to me about his will. Not in detail. He was private about specifics. But he'd told me explicitly that the house was not going to Mom. He'd told me that on the porch, on a Sunday evening, in September 2021, 5 months before this will was supposedly signed, "I love your mother," he'd said. But she'd sell this house in 2 years and give the money to Vanessa. You know it, I know it, the mailman knows it. He'd laughed at his own joke. I'd laughed too. So why did this will say the opposite? I looked up from the document. Mom was watching me with an expression I recognized. The expression she wore when she'd already made a decision and was waiting for you to agree with it. "This doesn't seem right," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" "Grandpa told me the house wasn't going to you." The kitchen went silent. Even the pot on the stove stopped bubbling. "He was sick, Naomi," Mom said carefully. "He said a lot of things toward the end. He was confused." He wasn't confused. He was the sharpest person I've ever known. People change their minds. In February, when he could barely sit up, he signed a new will in February. Vanessa spoke for the first time. "Mom showed me the will weeks ago, Naomi. It's legit. Mr. Whitfield verified it." Weeks ago. She'd known for weeks. They'd both known. And this family meeting wasn't a meeting. It was a presentation. A done deal, wrapped in the pretense of discussion. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something Grandpa Ray would have recognized. Clarity. "Okay," I said. Mom blinked. "Okay? Okay, if that's what the will says, that's what it says." I stood up, folded the napkin I'd been holding, and set it on the table. "I'll let you and Mr. Whitfield handle the details." I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I got in my Civic and drove 20 minutes to my apartment and sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes without moving. Then I opened my closet, pulled out the fireproof safe, and held the manila envelope my grandfather had given me. I knew it was time. Inside the envelope, I found 5 things. 1. A letter, handwritten, 4 pages long, in Grandpa Ray's careful block handwriting. 2. A key, small, brass, with a number stamped on it, 441. 3. A business card for a man named Martin Osei, attorney at law, with an office address in East Orange. 4. A USB drive, taped to an index card that said, "Backup of everything." 5. A photograph I'd never seen before. Grandpa Ray, standing in front of a building I didn't recognize, smiling, with his arm around a woman who wasn't my grandmother. I started with the letter. "Dear Naomi," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and your mother has probably already shown you a will that leaves her the house and splits the money 3 ways. I want you to know that will is real. I signed it, but I signed it because she asked me to, and I was too tired to fight. Here's what she doesn't know. That will covers the assets she knows about. The house, the savings accounts at First National, the pension. That's what she was focused on, so that's what I gave her. But your mother never asked about the things she didn't know about, and I never volunteered. Naomi, I've been planning for this for 15 years. The key in this envelope opens Safety Deposit Box 441 at Commonwealth Federal Credit Union on South Harrison Street. Inside that box, you will find documents related to assets your mother has never seen, a second property, an investment account, and a trust. I set up the trust in 2008 through Martin Osei, who has been my attorney, my real attorney, not the one your mother found, for 22 years. The trust is in your name. It has been funded. Slowly, carefully, over the past 15 years. Your mother never noticed because I never took large amounts at once. $200 here, $500 there, a small transfer every month. Over 15 years, it added up. Martin has all the details. He's expecting your call. He's a good man, honest, careful, and he doesn't like being lied to, so don't try. One more thing. The USB drive has copies of everything. Every document, every transfer record, every piece of correspondence between me and Martin. It also has something else. Records of every time your mother withdrew money from my accounts without asking. Every time she forged my signature on a check. Every time she transferred funds to Vanessa's account and told me it was for household expenses. She didn't steal a lot. She's not bold enough for that. But over the years, it adds up to about $47,000. I kept records because that's what I do. I deliver, I document, I keep track. I'm not telling you this to make you hate your mother. I'm telling you this so you understand the will she has is not the whole picture. It's the picture she painted for herself. The real picture is in box 441. You were the one who sat at my kitchen table and learned. You were the one who saved her birthday money and asked questions about interest rates. You were the one who listened. I'm leaving you what I can, Naomi. Not because Vanessa doesn't deserve love. She does. But love and money aren't the same thing. Your mother never understood that. I hope you do. Use it wisely. Build something. And if your sister ever asks you for a loan, remember what I told you about organized patience. All my love, forever. Grandpa Ray. I read the letter 3 times. By the second time, I was crying. By the third time, I'd stopped. I wasn't sad anymore. I was focused. I called Martin Osei the next morning at 9:01 a.m. His receptionist answered on the second ring. A woman named Dolores who sounded like she'd been expecting my call for years. "You must be Naomi," she said warmly. "Martin said you'd call soon. Let me get him." Martin Osei had a deep, unhurried voice, the kind of voice that made you feel like everything was going to be handled, and handled correctly. He told me he'd known my grandfather since 2000, when Grandpa Ray walked into his office with a question about setting up a trust for a minor. "That minor was you," Martin said. "You were 5 years old." He explained that Grandpa Ray had established the Naomi A. Carter Irrevocable Trust in 2008, funding it through systematic monthly contributions that had been invested conservatively, index funds, bonds, and a small allocation to blue-chip stocks. "Your grandfather wasn't a gambler," Martin said. "He was a builder. He put money in, left it alone, and let time do the work." "How much is in the trust?" I asked. There was a pause. Not a dramatic pause. Martin wasn't dramatic. A careful pause. The pause of a man who understood that numbers could change a person's life and should be delivered with appropriate weight. "As of last month's statement," he said, "the trust has a total value of $487,000. I sat down. I was already sitting, but I sat down harder. $487,000? I repeated. "And change?" he said. "The exact figure is $487,211.34. Your grandfather's monthly contributions averaged $400 over 15 years. That's approximately $72,000 in total contributions. The rest is growth, compound interest, dividend reinvestment, and market appreciation. Organized patience. That's what he'd called it. And he'd been practicing it for 15 years, $400 at a time. For me. There's also the property," Martin added. "What property?" "Your grandfather purchased a small commercial building on Park Avenue in East Orange in 2012. A 2-story property, retail on the ground floor, office space above. He bought it through the trust for $185,000. It's currently valued at approximately $310,000. And it generates $2,800 per month in rental income, which has been reinvested into the trust." I didn't speak. "Naomi, are you still there?" "I'm here," I said. I'm trying to—" "Take your time," he said. "Your grandfather spent 15 years building this. You can take a few minutes to absorb it." I did. I took 20 minutes. Martin waited patiently on the line, occasionally sipping what I assumed was coffee. When I finally spoke again, my voice was steady. "My mother doesn't know about any of this?" "No. Your grandfather was very specific about that. The trust is irrevocable, which means it cannot be altered, amended, or revoked by anyone, including your mother, even if she discovers its existence. The assets in the trust are legally yours. They were never part of his probate estate, which means the will your mother has, whatever it says, has no bearing on the trust whatsoever." "And the USB drive? The records of her withdrawals?" "I have originals of everything on that drive. Your grandfather kept meticulous records. If your mother were to challenge the trust, which she can't, legally, but if she tried, those records would demonstrate a pattern of unauthorized withdrawals that would complicate her position considerably." I understood then what Grandpa Ray had done. He hadn't fought Mom. He hadn't argued with the will she'd pressured him into signing. He'd simply built something she couldn't reach, couldn't see, and couldn't take. He'd played the long game, just like he taught me. I didn't tell anyone. Not Mom. Not Vanessa. Not my best friend Tanya. I went to the credit union, opened box 441 with the brass key, and found exactly what Grandpa Ray's letter described: the trust documents, the property deed, the investment statements, and a second letter. Shorter, just 3 lines. "Don't let them make you feel guilty for having what you earned by paying attention. The house was always meant for you. I just had to make sure they couldn't get to it first." The house was always meant for you. I read that line 7 times. For the next few months, I kept my head down. I continued freelancing. I visited Mom on Sundays. Shorter visits now because being in that house felt different. I could see it clearly now, the new kitchen backsplash Mom had installed in April using money from the savings. The bathroom remodel Vanessa suggested in May. The house was worth $680,000, but they were treating it like a credit card. Vanessa, meanwhile, had a new project. She'd met a woman named Jacqueline at a networking event, the kind of event where people exchanged Instagram handles instead of business cards. And Jacqueline had pitched her on a business idea, a luxury nail salon and beauty bar targeting high-end clients who wanted a boutique experience. Vanessa was obsessed. She talked about it constantly. She'd created a mood board. She'd found a space in Hoboken. She had a name picked out, Lux and Lacquer. What she didn't have was money. The ask came on a Saturday in September. I was at Mom's house for a Sunday dinner that had been mysteriously moved to Saturday, a scheduling change that I now recognize as strategic. Vanessa was wearing a blazer. This should have been my second warning. Vanessa didn't wear blazers. So I've been working on something, she said, as Mom brought out baked chicken and rice that was somehow both overcooked and undercooked, a talent unique to Gloria Carter. Jacqueline and I are opening a salon, Lux and Lacquer. It's going to be high-end. Gel, acrylics, lash extensions, brow lamination, the whole thing. We've found the perfect location in Hoboken. That sounds nice, I said carefully. We've done the math. She pulled out her phone and showed me a spreadsheet that looked like it had been made by someone who'd watched a single YouTube video about business plans. Total startup costs are about $92,000. Jacqueline is putting in $35,000. We've got a small business loan approved for $28,000. I could see where this was going. I could feel it like a train approaching in the dark, the rumble before the headlight. So we just need $29,000 more, Vanessa said. She looked at me with those wide brown eyes, the golden child eyes, the eyes that had been getting her out of trouble since she was 6 years old. And I was hoping you could invest. There it was. Invest, I repeated. It's not a loan, she said quickly. It's an investment. You'd get a percentage of the business. Jacqueline is amazing. She's been doing nails for 9 years. She has a huge following on Instagram, and the Hoboken market is totally underserved for luxury beauty. I looked at Mom. Mom was focused very intently on her chicken. I can't, I said. The table went quiet. What do you mean you can't? Vanessa's voice changed. Not angry yet, but the warmth drained out of it like water out of a bathtub. I mean, I can't give you $29,000, Vanessa. That's a lot of money. I said it's an investment, not... I heard what you said, and the answer is no. Vanessa looked at Mom. Mom looked at me. Naomi, your sister is trying to build something, Mom said. She's finally being responsible. This is a real business. Then a bank will fund it. The bank already approved $28,000. They need the rest from personal investment. Then Jacqueline can find another investor. Jacqueline is already putting in $35,000. Good for Jacqueline. The temperature in the room dropped. Vanessa's jaw was tight. Mom's hands were flat on the table. Her, I'm about to lose my patience position. I don't understand why you're being like this, Vanessa said. You have the money. You've been saving for years. You don't spend anything. You drive a Honda. You live in a studio apartment. What are you even saving for? That's not your business. I'm your sister. That doesn't make my savings your business. Vanessa stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. A sound I can still hear if I close my eyes. You know what your problem is, Naomi? You're selfish. You've always been selfish. You sit there with your little spreadsheets and your little savings account, and you judge everyone else for not being as boring as you. But when someone actually needs help, when your own sister needs help, you can't be bothered. Vanessa. No, forget it. I don't even want your money. I'll figure it out myself. I always do. She walked out of the kitchen. The screen door slammed. Mom let out a long breath. That went well, I said. You could have handled that better, Mom said quietly. I said no. How should I have said it? You could have at least thought about it. I did think about it. The answer is no. Mom shook her head and started clearing plates. The conversation was over, but I knew, the way you know a bone is broken before the doctor tells you, that this wasn't finished. It wasn't even close to finished. 2 weeks passed. Vanessa didn't call me. Mom called twice, but only talked about the weather and a leak in the upstairs bathroom, which was Mom code for, I'm upset with you, but I'm not going to say it directly. I focused on work. I'd landed a big client, a wellness brand called Innerroot that needed a full rebrand, including logo, website, packaging, and social media templates. It was a $14,000 contract, the biggest of my career. I was spending 12-hour days on it, and all my work was on my laptop. The laptop. I should have backed everything up. I knew that. Grandpa Ray had taught me about backups, physical backups, cloud backups, redundancy. Anything that exists in only one place doesn't really exist, he'd said. It's just borrowing time. But I'd been busy and tired, and the Inner Root project was consuming everything. I'd backed up most of my files to Google Drive, but the most recent versions, the final logo variations, the website mock-ups, 3 weeks of revisions, were only on my MacBook. And the Grandpa Ray folder, the one where I'd been scanning his documents, organizing his letters, saving photos. I'd started it as a personal project. A digital archive of everything he'd left me, including photos of the trust documents, screenshots of account statements, and notes from my calls with Martin. That folder was only on the laptop. It was a Sunday, late September. Mom had invited me over for a barbecue, her way of pretending the $29,000 conversation hadn't happened. Vanessa would be there, which I took as a sign that she was ready to be civil. I brought potato salad because that was my assigned dish for every family gathering since I was 19. I also brought my laptop because I'd planned to work on the Inner Root project during the inevitable 2 hours Mom would spend arguing with the grill. Vanessa was in the pool when I arrived. She waved. I waved back. See? Civil. I set my laptop on the patio table, the glass-topped table next to the pool, which, yes, in retrospect was not the smartest place to put a $2,400 computer, but I'd set it there 100 times before without incident. Mom and I went inside to prep food. We were in the kitchen for maybe 40 minutes. Mom was talking about the bathroom leak again, and I was half listening while cutting tomatoes. Normal Sunday. Normal conversation. Normal everything. Then Vanessa walked in. She had a towel over her shoulder, her hair dripping, and she was holding a glass of lemonade with the casual posture of someone who hadn't just done anything wrong. "Oh, sorry," she said. "I accidentally dropped your laptop in the pool." She said it while reaching for a glass from the cabinet. She didn't look at me. "It just slipped," she added. "I was carrying it to show Mom that article you sent, and it slipped." I hadn't sent Mom any article. I looked at Mom. Mom was peeling an orange. She didn't look up. "It was just an accident, Naomi," she said. "Don't make a big deal out of it." And there it was. The script. The familiar script I'd heard my entire life. Vanessa does something, Mom minimizes it. I'm told not to overreact. The cycle repeats. But something was different this time. Something in Vanessa's voice. Or rather, something missing from it. There was no guilt. No shame. Not even the performative, "Oh no, I feel so bad," that she usually deployed after breaking something of mine. She was calm. Almost satisfied. And then I understood. This wasn't an accident. This was punishment. I'd refused her $29,000. So she'd destroyed my most valuable possession. Not just the hardware, but the work inside it. 3 weeks of client revisions. My portfolio. And, she probably thought, my leverage. But here's what Vanessa didn't know. What she couldn't have known, because she'd never once sat at Grandpa Ray's kitchen table on a Saturday morning. I don't keep my leverage in one place. The trust documents were in box 441. Martin O'Say had originals of everything. The USB drive was in my fireproof safe at home. The laptop folder was a convenience copy. Painful to lose, but not fatal. What was fatal, or at least expensive, was the Inner Root project. 3 weeks of work, gone. That would cost me time, sleep, and possibly the client. That was real damage. But I didn't show it. "Okay," I said. Vanessa blinked. Mom looked up. "Okay?" Mom said. "Okay," I repeated. I picked up my keys. "I'm going to head out." "You're not staying for the barbecue?" Mom sounded genuinely confused, as if she couldn't understand why someone whose laptop was currently conducting electricity at the bottom of a swimming pool might not feel like eating ribs. "Not hungry," I said. I walked to my car. I drove home, and I sat in my apartment for exactly 9 minutes before I started making calls. The first call was to Martin O'Say. It was Sunday evening, but Martin answered on the third ring, because Martin was the kind of attorney who answered on the third ring on Sunday evenings. "Martin, it's Naomi. I need to talk to you about acceleration." "Acceleration of what?" "Everything." I told him what happened. The laptop, the pool, the calculated casualness of it. He listened without interrupting. "Your client files," he said. "Were they backed up?" "Partially. I have the early versions on Google Drive. I'll have to redo 3 weeks of work, but I can recover." "And the trust documents on the laptop?" "Copies only. You have the originals. I have the USB. The box has the hard copies. Nothing critical was lost." "Good. So what do you want to accelerate?" "I want to start using the trust. I want to buy a property. I want to build something real. And I want to make sure that when my mother and sister figure out what Grandpa Ray actually left me, because they will, eventually, that everything is already locked in, airtight, untouchable. Martin was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather said you'd say exactly that. When? About 5 years ago. He said, one day Naomi is going to call you and tell you she's ready to build. When she does, don't slow her down. My throat tightened. Even gone, he was still one step ahead. I'm ready, I said. Then let's build. The second call was to my client, Rachel, at Inner Route. I told her there'd been a data loss. I didn't give details, and that I needed 10 extra days to reconstruct the final deliverables. Rachel was understanding. She was also a small business owner who'd had her own setbacks, and she appreciated honesty. Take the time you need, she said. Just keep me posted. The third call was to Tanya, my best friend since high school. Tanya was a cybersecurity analyst at a firm in Newark, and she was the most methodical person I knew outside of Grandpa Ray. I need your help with something, I said. Is it legal? Completely. Then I'm in. I explained the situation. Not the trust, not yet, just the laptop and the family dynamics. Tanya already knew the broad strokes. She'd been watching the Vanessa and Gloria show for 15 years. What do you need? She asked. I need to change every password connected to that laptop. Email, cloud storage, financial accounts, social media, everything. I need to make sure nobody can access anything through cached logins or saved credentials. Smart. Give me an hour. Tanya walked me through a full security reset. 2-factor authentication on every account, new passwords generated through a password manager, recovery email changed to an address nobody in my family knew. We revoked sessions on every device, checked for any linked accounts, and set up alerts for login attempts from unrecognized devices. One more thing, Tanya said. If your sister actually tried to use that laptop before dropping it in the pool, if she opened it first, she might have seen whatever was on your screen. Was anything sensitive open? I thought about it. My stomach turned. The Grandpa Ray folder. I'd been organizing it that morning before driving to Mom's house. Had I closed it? Had I locked the screen? I couldn't remember. I don't know, I admitted. Then assume she saw something and act accordingly. I called Martin back. We need to assume my sister may have seen references to the trust. Understood, he said. I'll prepare a preemptive legal summary. If she or your mother contacts me, I'll refer them to the documents. The trust is irrevocable. There is nothing they can do, but it's better to be prepared. By midnight, every digital door was closed, locked, and deadbolted. My accounts were secure. My work was being rebuilt. My legal position was solid. And I'd set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. because tomorrow morning I had one more thing to do. At 5:45 a.m., I was in my car driving to Ridgewood. At 6 a.m., I parked on Mulberry Lane, 2 houses down from Mom's house. At 6:10 a.m., I walked to the front door and used my key. The key I'd had since I was 16, the key Mom had never asked me to return. The house was dark. Mom and Vanessa were both asleep. Mom in the master bedroom, Vanessa in the converted guest room that had been hers and then mine, and then hers again, and now hers seemingly forever. I went to the kitchen table and placed 3 things on it. 1. A printed letter from Martin Osei, attorney at law, on official letterhead. The letter stated, in precise legal language, that the estate of Raymond Carter Sr. included assets beyond those addressed in the probate will, that those assets were held in an irrevocable trust for the sole benefit of Naomi Carter, and that any attempt to contest, claim, or interfere with the trust would be met with legal action, including potential disclosure of documented unauthorized withdrawals from the decedent's accounts. 2. A printed spreadsheet, a summary of the $47,000 in unauthorized withdrawals, organized by date, amount, and source account. Each line item cross-referenced with bank statements that Martin had on file. 3. My house key. I set it next to the letter with a small click. Then I left. I was in my car by 6:13 a.m. I drove to the corner of Mulberry and Oak, parked under a tree, and waited. At 6:15 a.m., the light in Vanessa's room turned on. At 6:17 a.m., the kitchen light turned on. At 6:22 a.m., Mom's bedroom light turned on. At 6:24 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mom. I let it go to voicemail. At 6:25 a.m., it rang again. Mom? Voicemail. At 6:26 a.m., Vanessa called. I declined. At 6:27 a.m., Mom called a third time. I picked up. Naomi. Mom's voice was shaking. Not with sadness, with something I'd never heard from her before. Fear. What is this? What did you leave on the table? It's exactly what it looks like, I said. Your grandfather, he You're saying he left you. I'm saying what the letter says. Grandpa Ray set up a trust. It's mine. It's been mine for 15 years. And those withdrawal records are accurate, Mom. You know they are. Silence. The kind of silence that has texture. Thick. Suffocating. The silence of someone whose story just collapsed. This isn't fair, Mom whispered. No, I agreed. It isn't. But neither was the will, was it? More silence. I want my laptop replaced, I continued. The exact model. MacBook Pro M2 16-inch 32 gig RAM. That's $3,499. I also want reimbursement for 21 hours of reconstructed client work at my freelance rate of $125 per hour. That's $2,625. Total, $6,124. I'll send you the invoice. Naomi? And I want Vanessa to know that dropping that laptop was the most expensive mistake she's ever made. Not because of the money, but because it was the moment I stopped caring about being the quiet one. I hung up. I sat in my car under that tree for another 10 minutes. My hands were shaking. My eyes were dry. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on ground that belonged to me. The fallout was immediate and predictable. Vanessa called me 14 times that day. I answered the 15th. You had $500,000 this whole time? She screamed. Grandpa left you $500,000 and you said no to my business? Are you kidding me? I said no to giving you $29,000 of my money for a business with no viable plan, a spreadsheet you made in 45 minutes, and a partner whose primary qualification is an Instagram following. Jacqueline has 9 years of experience. Jacqueline has 9 years of working for other people. That's not the same as running a business. You don't know anything about... I know that you asked me for money, and when I said no, you destroyed my laptop. That tells me everything I need to know about how you handle not getting what you want. Vanessa was crying now. I didn't mean to drop it. It really was. Don't insult me. You carried a laptop from a patio table to a pool, and it slipped. That's not an accident, Vanessa. That's a tantrum. She hung up. Mom called an hour later. Her voice was different now. Controlled. Diplomatic. Gloria Carter had entered negotiation mode. Naomi, I think we need to sit down and talk about this like adults. I am an adult. That's why I have a trust, a lawyer, and a plan. What your grandfather did, setting up that trust without telling me, it wasn't right. I was his daughter. I took care of him. I deserve... You got the house, Mom, a $680,000 house. You got a third of the savings, roughly $113,000. You got everything the will gave you. The trust wasn't part of the will because it was never part of the estate. That's how trusts work. I didn't know about any trust. No, you didn't. Because you never asked. You assumed you knew everything about his finances because you had access to his bank accounts. But you only knew what he let you see. Silence again. And the withdrawals, Mom started. $47,000 over 12 years. Do you want me to read you the spreadsheet? Those were for expenses, for the house, for raising you girls. Some of them were transfers to Vanessa's checking account labeled 5 shopping and 5 car payment. Grandpa wasn't confused, Mom. He was meticulous. Mom started to cry. Not the performative crying she did at family gatherings. Real crying, the ugly kind, the kind that sounds like something breaking. He loved you more, she said through the tears. He always loved you more. And there it was. The real wound. Not the money, not the trust, not the will. The love? The belief that her father had chosen me over her. That's not true, I said, and I meant it. He loved you. He left you the house. He didn't set up this trust because he loved me more. He set it up because he knew you'd give everything to Vanessa. He told me that. Not with anger, with sadness. He wished you'd been different, Mom. But he planned for who you actually were. Mom hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't hear from either of them for 3 weeks. It was the longest stretch of silence in our family's history, and, honestly, it was the most peaceful 3 weeks I'd had in years. I used the time to rebuild. Tanya helped me set up a proper backup system. 3 copies of everything, 2 different storage media, 1 off-site. The 3-2-1 rule, she called it. Grandpa Ray would have approved. I finished the Inner Route project 2 days ahead of the extended deadline. Rachel was thrilled. She referred me to 2 other clients, and by October I was booking $9,000 a month in freelance work. Martin and I met twice to discuss the trust. He walked me through the property in East Orange, a 2-story building that housed a barbershop on the ground floor and a tax preparation office above. Both tenants had been there for years, paying reliably, causing no trouble. The building needed a new roof within the next 2 years, estimated cost $42,000, but was otherwise solid. Your grandfather chose this building because it was boring, Martin said with a smile. Boring buildings with reliable tenants are the best kind of investment. They won't make you rich overnight, but they'll make you rich eventually. He also showed me the investment portfolio, $487,000, a mix of index funds, bonds, and dividend stocks that had been compounding quietly for 15 years. Grandpa Ray had never touched the returns. Every dividend, every distribution, every gain had been reinvested. At this growth rate, Martin said, if you don't touch it for another 10 years, it'll be worth roughly $1.2 million. $1.2 million. From $400 a month? And patience. I thought about Vanessa's $6,200 in credit card debt, about Mom's $47,000 in unauthorized withdrawals, about the Lexus payment, about the designer bags, about Derek and his premium supplements, about Jacqueline and her Instagram following, and I thought about Grandpa Ray at his kitchen table, pushing toast toward me, saying, money is just organized patience. He'd given me the most valuable thing a person can give, a head start and the knowledge to use it. But the story doesn't end there, because Vanessa, my sister, my golden, sparkling, blazer-wearing sister, didn't take her loss quietly. In November, a month after the silence, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman named Priya, who identified herself as a paralegal at the law office of Whitfield and Associates, Mom's lawyer, the one who'd handled the probate will. Ms. Carter, I'm calling to inform you that your mother, Gloria Carter, has filed a petition to challenge the validity of the Raymond Carter Sr. irrevocable trust. The petition alleges that the trust was established under undue influence and that the decedent lacked sufficient mental capacity at the time of its creation. I almost laughed. Almost? Martin, I called him the second I hung up. They're challenging the trust. Martin didn't sound surprised. I expected this. Whitfield's a real estate attorney playing at estate law. He doesn't know what he's getting into. What do? We respond. Calmly, thoroughly, and with 15 years of documentation that shows your grandfather was sharp as a tack when he set this up. I have notarized letters, medical records, witness statements, and annual reviews. Every year, your grandfather came to my office, reviewed the trust, confirmed its terms, and signed a competency affidavit. Every single year, for 15 years. He did that? He did that because he knew this day would come. Your grandfather didn't just plan for the trust, Naomi. He planned for the fight over the trust. I closed my eyes. Even from beyond the grave, Grandpa Ray was still teaching Saturday morning lessons. The legal challenge dragged on for 4 months. Mom's attorney filed the petition in November. Martin responded in December with a 47-page brief that included Grandpa Ray's annual competency affidavits, 15 years of trust documents, medical records showing no cognitive decline until the final months of his life, and the pièce de résistance, a sworn statement from Grandpa Ray's physician, Dr. Eleanor Watkins, confirming that Raymond Carter Sr. had been of sound mind and sharp intellect throughout the entire period of the trust's existence. I saw him every 6 months for 20 years, Dr. Watkins had written. He was one of the most mentally acute patients I've ever treated. He could quote postal regulations from memory at age 79. The suggestion that he lacked capacity is, frankly, absurd. Whitfield tried to counter with testimony from Mom, sworn statements about Grandpa Ray's confusion in his later years, about how he'd forgotten things and gotten mixed up. But Martin had anticipated this too. Your mother's testimony contradicts her own behavior, Martin told me during a conference call. If she believed your grandfather was mentally compromised, why did she have him sign a new will in February 2022, 1 month before his death? Either he was competent enough to sign that will, in which case he was competent when he established the trust, or he wasn't competent, in which case the will itself is invalid. Checkmate. In March 2023, almost exactly 1 year after Grandpa Ray's death, the court dismissed Mom's petition. The judge, a woman named Helen Park who had absolutely no patience for frivolous estate challenges, wrote in her ruling that the trust was established with extraordinary diligence and foresight, and the petitioner has presented no credible evidence to undermine its validity. Martin called me with the news. It's over, he said. Is it really? Legally? Yes, the trust stands. Your mother's petition is dismissed with prejudice, which means she can't refile. The assets are yours. Legally, it was over, but family isn't governed by law. I didn't hear from Mom for 2 months after the ruling. When she finally called, it was a Tuesday evening in May, and her voice sounded 10 years older. Naomi, I need to talk to you. Okay. Not on the phone. Can you come to the house? I hesitated. The house, Grandpa Ray's house, now Mom's house, hadn't felt like home in a long time, but something in her voice made me agree. I drove to Ridgewood on Saturday morning. The house looked the same on the outside. The same green shutters, the same concrete walkway, the same oak tree in the front yard that Grandpa Ray had planted in 1986. But inside, it felt different. Emptier. Not of furniture, of spirit. Mom was at the kitchen table. No cooking, no orange peeling, no nervous bustling. She was just sitting. There was coffee. 2 mugs, one for each of us. She'd remembered that I took mine with cream and no sugar. Sit down, she said. Not a command. A request. I sat. She looked at me for a long time. I waited. Grandpa Ray had taught me the power of silence. That the person who speaks first in a negotiation usually loses. But this wasn't a negotiation. This was something else. I sold the house, she said. I blinked. You what? I put it on the market last month. We're closing in 3 weeks. The buyers are a young couple, the Ahmeds. They have twin boys. Mom, why? She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. Because your grandfather was right. I was going to burn through everything. The house, the savings, all of it. And I was going to let Vanessa help me do it because that's what I've always done. I've always given her whatever she wanted because I was afraid she'd stop loving me if I didn't. She said it plainly, without drama, like she was reading a fact off a medical chart. The house sold for $715,000, she continued. After the mortgage payoff and closing costs, I netted $623,000. I've put $400,000 into a managed investment account. Your grandfather's attorney, Martin, helped me set it up. Don't look so surprised. I called him. It was the hardest call I've ever made, but I called him. And the rest? $100,000 stays in savings for emergencies. $73,000 goes to paying off debts, mine and Vanessa's. And $50,000 goes back to your grandfather's accounts to cover the withdrawals. I know the math doesn't add up to $47,000. The extra is interest. Martin calculated it. I stared at my mother. I'd known her for 27 years. And I had never, not once, heard her take this kind of accountability. What changed? I asked. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Old, yellowed, creased from being read many times. She handed it to me. It was a letter. Grandpa Ray's handwriting. Dear Gloria, it read, I know you'll be angry when you find out about the trust. You'll think I chose Naomi over you. I didn't. I chose differently for each of you because you need different things. You need to learn that love isn't the same as giving someone everything they want. And Vanessa needs to learn that the world won't always catch her when she falls. I couldn't teach either of you those lessons while I was alive. I was too soft. I loved you too much to say the hard things. So I put the hard things in a trust and let a lawyer say them for me. Forgive an old man for being a coward. I love you. Dad. My hands were shaking. He left it in the kitchen drawer, Mom said. I found it 3 days after the court ruling. It was taped to the bottom of the silverware tray. He must have put it there months before he died. I wanted to laugh. Of course he did. The man had thought of everything. I've been reading it every morning, Mom said. And every morning I understand it a little more. Vanessa did not take the house sale well. She'd assumed the house was her permanent backup plan, the place she could always return to, the safety net that would always be there. When Mom told her it was sold, Vanessa exploded. You're selling the house? Where am I supposed to live? You're 30 years old, Vanessa, Mom said. I know this because Mom told me the conversation later, word for word, with the exhausted clarity of someone who'd finally stopped lying to herself. You need to figure that out. This is because of Naomi, isn't it? She turned you against me. No one turned me against you. Your grandfather wrote me a letter. I read it, and I finally listened. Vanessa moved out 2 weeks later. She crashed with Jacqueline for a month, then rented a studio in Jersey City. The salon, Luxe and Lacquer, never materialized. It turned out Jacqueline's Eddie $35,000 investment was money she'd planned to borrow from her ex-husband. And when the ex-husband found out the business plan was built on an Instagram following and a mood board, he said no. But here's the thing about Vanessa. The thing that makes this story more complicated than a simple hero and villain tale. She's not stupid. She's not evil. She's a person who was never told no, who was never allowed to fail, who was caught every single time she fell and therefore never learned to land. And in January 2024, 9 months after Mom sold the house, Vanessa called me, not Mom, not a friend, me. Can I ask you something? She said. Her voice was different, quieter, stripped of performance. And can you just answer honestly? No lectures, no lessons, just an honest answer. Okay. Am I a terrible person? I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence sit, the way Grandpa Ray would have. No, I said finally. You're a person who was never taught certain things. That's not the same as being terrible. Mom always I know what Mom always did, and I know it wasn't fair to either of us. She gave you too much and me too little, and we both ended up damaged by it. Vanessa was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry about the laptop, she said. It wasn't an accident. I know. I was so angry. You had money and you wouldn't help me, and I wanted to hurt you. I know. That's really messed up. Yeah. Another silence. Then, Grandpa would be so disappointed in me. Grandpa would tell you what he told me when I was 12 and I lied about breaking his reading glasses. He'd say, now that you've told the truth, we can work with it. It's the lying that gets in the way. Vanessa made a sound, half laugh, half sob. He said that. Word for word. He had a phrase for everything. I wish I'd listened. You can start now. Over the next 6 months, something shifted between us. Not a dramatic reconciliation, those only happen in movies. A slow, awkward, stumbling realignment. Like two bones that had been set wrong and were being carefully rebroken and reset. Vanessa got a job at a salon in Hoboken. Not her own salon, not luxury, not luxe and lacquer. A regular salon called Bella's that paid $22 an hour plus tips. She was good at it. She'd always been good with her hands and good with people. She just needed to be good at it inside someone else's structure before she could build her own. I helped her set up a savings account. I showed her the basics. The same lessons Grandpa Ray had given me at his kitchen table, just 20 years later. She was a reluctant student, impatient, easily frustrated, but she kept showing up. How much do I need to save before I can open my own place? She asked one evening. We were at a diner in Montclair, sharing fries. A new ritual. Every other Wednesday, dinner, no phones. Depends on the location, the size, the build-out costs. But you should have at least 6 months of operating expenses in the bank before you sign a lease. For a small salon, that's probably $60,000 to $80,000. That's going to take forever. No, it's going to take time. There's a difference. She rolled her eyes, but she wrote the number down on a napkin. Meanwhile, I was building. Martin and I had identified a second property, a small mixed-use building in Montclair, 3 blocks from my apartment. Ground floor retail, 2 residential units above. The asking price was $425,000. The building needed work, new plumbing, updated electrical, cosmetic renovations, but the bones were solid, and the location was walking distance to the train station, which meant the residential units would rent easily. I used $280,000 from the trust as a down payment, and financed the rest through a small business loan at 5.2%. The rental income from the East Orange property covered the loan payments with $600 to spare each month. I hired a contractor named Luis Herrera, a man Martin had worked with before, methodical, fair, and pathologically punctual. Luis and his crew spent 4 months renovating the building, while I handled the design work myself. New signage, interior finishes, a website for the property management company I'd set up through Martin. The company was called Carter Properties, LLC. Grandpa Ray's name, my name. The Montclair building was fully leased by June 2024. Ground floor went to a coffee shop called Heron and Bloom, run by a couple named David and Simone who made the best cortado I'd ever tasted. The 2 apartments above went to a graduate student and a young couple expecting their first child. Monthly rental income, $6,400. After mortgage, insurance, and maintenance reserve, $2,100 in net cash flow. I was 29 years old and I owned 2 buildings, had a growing freelance design business, and sat on a trust worth over $500,000. And every single morning, I drank my coffee and thought about a kitchen table and a plate of toast and a man who said, most people can't leave it alone. That's their problem. In August 2024, Mom came to visit my apartment for the first time. She'd moved into a condo in West Orange, a clean, modern 2-bedroom that she'd bought with cash from the house sale. It was the first property she'd ever owned outright, without a mortgage, without relying on someone else's name. She walked through my studio slowly, looking at everything. The bookshelves filled with design books and business manuals. The desk where I worked 12 hours a day. The small framed photo of Grandpa Ray on the windowsill. Him in his postal uniform, squinting into the sun, grinning. "He'd be proud of you," she said. "I know," I said, not arrogant. Certain. She sat on my couch and folded her hands in her lap the way she did when she had something important to say. "I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear." I sat across from her. "Okay." "The will. The one I showed you. The one from February." She paused, swallowed. "Your grandfather didn't want to sign it." I didn't move. I pressured him. He was in bed. He was tired. He could barely hold the pen. "Brenda. You remember my friend Brenda. She knew an attorney, Whitfield, who could draw up a new will fast. I told Dad it was just an update, just to make things cleaner. He said he already had a will. I told him this was better." Her voice cracked. "He looked at me, Naomi. He looked at me and he said, 'Gloria, you're my daughter and I love you, but this isn't right.' And I said, 'Please, Dad, just sign it. For me.'" She was crying now. Not the dramatic crying. The real kind. The kind that sounds like something you can't put back together. "So he signed it," she said. "Because he loved me, and because he was tired, and because he'd already built the trust and he knew this will didn't touch it. He let me have my version of the story because he'd already written the real one." I sat with that for a long time. My mother had pressured a dying man into signing a will. That was true. But Grandpa Ray had signed it knowingly, strategically, because the will gave Mom what she wanted while the trust preserved what mattered. He'd let her feel like she won, so she'd stop fighting. It was the most Grandpa Ray thing I'd ever heard. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I read his letter again last night. The one from the silverware tray. And the line that keeps hitting me is, 'It's the lying that gets in the way.' I've been lying to myself for 2 years. I'm done." I walked across the room and sat next to her on the couch. I didn't hug her. We weren't there yet. But I sat close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Do you hate me?" "No, I don't think I ever did. I think I was hurt. And I think you were scared. I was terrified of being old, of being alone, of not having enough. Your father left and I never recovered from the fear of it. I spent 30 years trying to make sure I'd never be left with nothing, and I almost turned into the thing I was afraid of." "Almost," I said. "But you didn't." Things didn't become perfect after that. Life isn't a YouTube video. You don't get a neat resolution and a soaring soundtrack and a fade to black. What you get is the slow, unglamorous work of rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. But here's what happened in the year that followed. Mom completed a 12-week financial literacy course at the community center in West Orange. She came home from the first class and called me incredulous. "Naomi, did you know about index funds?" "Yes, Mom. I've known about index funds since I was 11. Your grandfather was a genius." "I've been telling you that." She started volunteering at the community center, helping other women, mostly single mothers, mostly women who'd been left or abandoned, learn the basics of money management, budgeting, saving, investing. She wasn't an expert, but she was a good teacher because she could say, with complete honesty, "I made every mistake in the book. Let me show you which pages to skip." Vanessa hit $12,000 in savings by December 2024. She texted me a screenshot of her bank balance with 17 exclamation points and a single emoji, a flexing arm. It was the most beautiful financial statement I'd ever seen. She and Jacqueline reconnected, as friends, not business partners. Jacqueline had gotten a job managing a nail salon in Newark and was good at it. They talked about one day opening something together, but now the conversation was different. Now it involved numbers, timelines, market research, and the phrase operating expenses, a phrase Vanessa had never used before in her life. "I'm not ready yet," Vanessa told me in February 2025. "But I will be. Maybe in 2 years." "That's exactly right," I said. In March 2025, on the 3rd anniversary of Grandpa Ray's death, I drove to East Orange and parked in front of the commercial building. His building, now my building. The barber shop on the ground floor was busy. 3 chairs full, a man in the waiting area reading a newspaper, the buzz of clippers audible from the sidewalk. The tax office upstairs had a small sign in the window, now accepting appointments for 2025 filings. I sat in my car and looked at the building and thought about a man who delivered mail for 41 years and bought this property for $185,000 with money he'd saved $400 at a time. A man who understood that wealth isn't about what you spend. It's about what you build, what you protect, what you pass on. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. I'd been keeping a list of things Grandpa Ray taught me, things I wanted to remember, things I wanted to teach someone else someday. The list was long now. 67 entries. But I scrolled to the first one, the one I'd written the day after he died. Money is just organized patience. Most people can't leave it alone. That's their problem. I added a new entry, number 68. The biggest inheritance isn't money, it's knowing what to do with it. That spring, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I used $15,000 from my freelance savings, not the trust, my own earnings, to create a scholarship fund, the Raymond Carter Senior Memorial Scholarship, administered through Martin Osei's office, awarded to one graduating senior from East Orange each year who demonstrated quiet persistence, financial awareness, and a plan. Not the flashiest student, I told Martin. Not the one with the best grades or the most extracurriculars. The one who's been paying attention. The one who sat at the kitchen table while everyone else was at the mall. Martin smiled. He would have liked that. He would have said it was too much fuss, and then secretly been thrilled. That's exactly what he would have said. The first scholarship was awarded in June 2025 to a 17-year-old named Marcus Williams, who'd been raised by his grandmother, worked part-time at a grocery store, and had saved $3,200 for college by the time he graduated. His essay was about compound interest. He'd learned about it from a library book. I read that essay and cried for 20 minutes. By the fall of 2025, my life looked nothing like it had 3 years earlier. Carter Properties owned 2 buildings, with a third under contract, a 6-unit apartment building in Irvington that needed significant renovation but was priced below market because the seller was motivated. Luis Herrera was already working up estimates. My freelance business had grown into a small design studio, just me and one part-time assistant, a recent Rutgers grad named Aisha who reminded me of myself at 22. I was billing $15,000 a month and turning away work for the first time in my career. The trust had grown to $563,000. I hadn't touched the principal. I was feeding it with rental income and letting compound interest do what Grandpa Ray always said it would. The boring, unglamorous, unstoppable work of growing. And my family, my complicated, imperfect, infuriating family, was healing. Mom had dinner at my apartment every other Sunday. She'd gotten better at cooking. Or maybe she'd gotten less anxious, which amounted to the same thing. She brought her famous baked chicken, which she now seasoned properly and cooked at the correct temperature. And we ate together at my small kitchen table and talked about things we'd never talked about before. Her marriage, her fears, her regrets, the years she spent treating Vanessa like a project and me like furniture. I wasn't a bad mother, she said once, like she was trying to convince herself, but I was an uneven one. That's fair, I said. I gave Vanessa everything she wanted and nothing she needed. And I gave you nothing you wanted and everything you needed. Both of those were wrong. Yeah, I said. But you're here now. That counts. Vanessa came to some of those Sunday dinners. Not all of them. She was busy, building something real for the first time in her life. She'd started taking business classes at night, real ones, at Bergen Community College. She had a 3-year plan. She showed it to me one evening, typed, organized, with realistic projections and a contingency section. Who taught you about contingency planning? I asked. Some old man's granddaughter, she said. She's kind of annoying about spreadsheets. I threw a dinner roll at her. She caught it. We laughed. In January 2026, I did something I'd been thinking about for a long time. I sat down at my kitchen table, not Grandpa Ray's kitchen table, but mine, and I wrote a letter. Not a legal document, not a financial plan, a letter. Dear Grandpa Ray, it's been almost 4 years. The trust is at $563,000. I own 3 buildings. Well, 2.5. The Irvington property closes next month. Luis says the renovation will take 6 months. I say it'll take 8 because you taught me to always add 30% to contractor estimates. Mom is better. Not perfect. She's still Gloria Carter, which means she still overcooks chicken and gives unsolicited advice about my love life. But she's honest now. She reads your letter every morning. She told me that once, and I pretended not to cry. Vanessa is saving money. I know. I was surprised too. She has a plan, a real one. She learned what compound interest is. She said operating expenses the other day with a straight face, and I nearly fell out of my chair. I started a scholarship in your name. The first recipient is a kid named Marcus, who saved $3,200 working at a grocery store. He reminds me of you. I miss you. Not in the sharp, gasping way I missed you the first year. In the quiet way, the way you miss someone who's become part of how you think. Every decision I make, I hear your voice. Is this organized patience, or is this impulse? Are you building roots, or are you just busy? Would this survive a Saturday morning lesson? You left me something bigger than money, bigger than buildings, bigger than a trust fund. You left me a way of seeing the world, a way of understanding that the flashy thing is almost never the valuable thing, that the person who sits quietly and pays attention will always, always outlast the person who talks the loudest. That love is what you build, not what you give away. Mom got the house. Vanessa got the second chances. And I got you. I got Saturday mornings and toast and lessons about compound interest. I got a brass key and a manila envelope and a man who planned 15 years ahead because he believed in me before I believed in myself. That's the inheritance that matters. Not the money, the mindset. Not the trust, the trust. I'm building, Grandpa, every day. And I'm teaching others to build. You'd say I'm making too much fuss. You'd push the toast toward me and change the subject to postal regulations or index funds. But I think you'd be proud. I know you'd be proud. Love, always. Your Saturday morning student, Naomi. I folded the letter and put it in an envelope. I didn't seal it. I didn't need to. It wasn't for mailing. It was for remembering. I set it on the windowsill next to his photograph. Him in his postal uniform, squinting into the sun, grinning like a man who knew exactly what he was leaving behind. Last month, Vanessa hit $27,000 in savings. She called me at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday to tell me, which meant she was becoming a morning person, which meant she was becoming a different person entirely. I'm getting there, she said. You are Naomi? Yeah? Thank you for not giving me the $29,000. I smiled. It was the most expensive thank you I'd ever received. You're welcome, I said. Now go to work. She laughed and hung up. I poured my coffee, cream, no sugar, and sat at my kitchen table. The morning sun was coming through the window, hitting Grandpa Ray's photograph at an angle that made it look like he was winking. My phone buzzed. A text from Martin. Irvington Closing confirmed. Congratulations, Naomi. 3 buildings. Your grandfather would say it's too much fuss. I texted back. He'd also say the roof estimate is too low. Add 30%. Martin responded with a single emoji, a laughing face. Martin Osei, who'd been practicing law for 30 years and never once used casual punctuation, had sent me an emoji. Grandpa Ray would have been horrified and secretly thrilled. I finished my coffee, opened my laptop, the new one, the one Mom had paid for, the one that sat on a desk far from any swimming pool, and got to work. There were roots to grow, buildings to buy, lessons to teach, and an old man's patience to honor, one careful, deliberate, unglamorous day at a time. Outside my window, the sun was rising over Montclair. It was an ordinary morning. It was an extraordinary life. And it all started with a plate of toast and a man who said, "Sit down, baby girl. Let me tell you something about money."